Everyone. Okay, so week one over, week two is now here. So first week, we covered just basic syllabus stuff. Hopefully you went through all that stuff. Last class, we went over animation history. We also talked about what is the public domain, and we talked about Creative Commons. I'll admit those are not necessarily always the most fun of topics, but they're useful. Okay. Especially if you're going to make work and publish it, put it on YouTube. You don't want to strike down or something like that. So understanding what you can legally use and not legally use is very important. Today, we're finally going to get into animating. And before we really animate, we're going to draw. Okay. So today is going to be about learning Adobe Animate, the program. We'll go through the user interface, how to set it up, basic stuff like that. Then we'll get into drawing and go through sort of the tidbits about drawing with Adobe Animate. Okay. So that's going to be today's module. I just want to point out a couple of things. So a lot of times I'm going to be giving you guys exercises to work on. Okay. If I call something an exercise, that means it's not graded. Okay. So for instance, I'm going to be giving you guys module exercises. The point of these exercises is really just to practice and learn. You do not have to turn these in. I don't want them. Okay. They're just for your own reference. Okay. So, here's today's slides. It is a PDF. You might want to download it and look at it, have a copy of it. The other is a lot of times I might be giving you guys a files, okay? And if I give you guys files, they may be stored in what's called a zip file, okay? A .zip is what we call in computers a compression file, okay? The way you should think about a zip file is think about it like a suitcase or a bag, right? Let's say I have a bunch of stuff that I want to put into this bag. So I take it, I put it into this bag here, and then I close it and I zip it up. So in other words, it's one bag, but it has multiple items inside of it. And that's what a zip file is for a computer. It's technically considered one file, but when you unzip it or uncompress it, it will have, or it can, most of the time it will have multiple files inside of it. So this is a zip file. It counts as one file when you download it, but when you unzip it, when I give it to you, you will find that there are multiple files inside of it. Okay. How you download and unzip your computer, or sorry, uncompress a zip file depends on whether you're working on a Mac computer that is running OS X or whether you're running Windows. Okay. I am demonstrating from a Mac computer. So when I show it, it's using OS X. I currently do not have a Windows version, but I will link to a video that I made previously that you can watch that will show you how to unzip a zip file using Windows. Okay. So essentially what you do is you click, you download it. It will download to wherever your computer normally downloads files to, probably the downloads folder or the desktop. Those are typically the most common ones. If you are on a Mac computer, so this is a zip file right here. It'll say the word zip on this little icon on the left, or it kind of looks like a little package. On Windows, on Mac, it's very easy to unzip a zip file. You literally just double click on it, 1, 2, and you can see it unzips it. This is now a folder, and the folder has multiple files inside of it. Okay. On Windows, it's a little different. You cannot just double click on it. That will not work. Like I said, I will point you to a video because I don't have Windows where I can record this from. But essentially what you're going to do is highlight the zip file, you right click, And then there's going to be an option called not uncompress. I think it's just there's going to be a little pop-up menu, and I think you say send to. No, I think it's just uncompress, and then you say where you want the folder to be uncompressed to. I would recommend your desktop or something with Windows, and then it will uncompress the folder. Okay. It's important that if you're running Windows that you do unzip the folder. Windows has this ability to technically work with files even if they're still zipped. OS X doesn't let you do that. But the problem with that is if you open a file that is still considered zipped or compressed, you cannot save it. So it's very important that if you are on Windows, that if I give you a zip file, that you actually uncompress it. If it's still in compression mode, it's going to limit what you can do with it, and you may run into problems. Okay. So those are the files that you're going to need for today. You're also going to need Adobe Animate. So Adobe Animate, real quick, you may have heard it referred to as Adobe Flash or Macromedia Flash. These are all the same name. These are all names of the same program. Okay. It started, Adobe, or sorry, I'm getting all confused here. Macromedia Flash as a drawing program, animation program, began in the late 90s, 1990s. Okay. It was originally designed to create animations for the internet. So, in the last discussion, I talked about like some internet-based animations like Homestar Runner and stuff like that. This is, this is the kind of software that they use and still do. In the early 2000s, mid 2000s, like 2006, 5, 7, Macromedia was bought out by Adobe. Then it became Adobe Flash. Most of that was really just a name change. I wouldn't say that the software dramatically changed much. And then, I don't know, like maybe 5, 6 years ago, they changed the name to Adobe Animate. Once again, this is more of a name change than really anything else. It didn't dramatically change the software. Part of the reason that they changed the name was that Flash was a format that was built for the web as a way of displaying animation. And Adobe Flash as a technology is dead. It's no longer relevant. So I think Adobe switched the name, one, so that there wasn't confusion that, that you were creating Flash animations, or, PR wise, it doesn't really make sense to hang your hat on a technology that's kind of dead. So they decided to change the name. The program is still the same though. Okay. Adobe Animate has been used for a lot of programs or a lot of TV shows and such. So Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. Metalocalypse. Apocalypse. Home movies, some other and have been using this to create animation. So, even though it did start as really kind of animation for the web, it is used by a lot of professionals to create, animation for movies and TV, more for TV, really, if I'm being honest. Especially if it's a smaller animation studio. I'm going to be throughout the semester posting interviews that I do with animators. And there's an animation studio called Lowbrow Studios. They did a lot of animations for television. They did like what do they do? Adam Ruins Everything and some other TV shows where they animated, and it's, they have a very small crew of people. And so, Adobe Animate is good for doing work quicker, needing less people, being able to use certain technologies that we'll talk about, like skeletal systems and such, that it makes the animation process a lot faster. All right. So it is it's definitely a useful program. A lot of professionals in the field use it, especially obviously for 2D animation. you haven't already, you're going to need a copy of the program. Okay. So your choices are you can either buy a Creative Cloud license for $50 for 6 months and install it on your home computer. Or if that's not an option for you, you can work on campus. We have rooms in the 900 building, like 905, or sorry, 907, which does have Adobe Animate. And you'll have to go during the periods that it's open. Those are posted on the Canvas for you. I will email you and remind you of that kind of stuff. But you will need to have a copy of Adobe Animate installed. Okay. Let's open up the program. So you open up Adobe Animate. It's going to look something like this, give or take. I'm just going to open. So this is like kind of your start screen where you can make a new file or new composition, open a file. They have some learning things that you can do. These are sort of tutorials that you can work with. I must admit, I don't know the new system, 100%. I'm just actually going to open up one of the files that I gave you. So I gave you guys some exercise files. So I'm just going to go to open here on the far left, and I'm going to hit open. And let's just go to exercise 1. The native format of Adobe is what's called an FLA file, which is short for Flash. Even though technically it's not called Flash, they still call it an FLA file. That is the native or the default format, kind of like how Photoshop has a PSD or an AI, Adobe Illustrator has an AI file. The FLA is the native or the default format of Adobe Animate. So I'm just going to find this. This is exercise 1. We're going to go down here to open. And this is just opening a composition here into Adobe Animate. I'm going to go through the user interface of the program real quick. All right, so right here, this is our stage. Okay, the stage is the main area. This is the part that will be exported. So when we export this to a movie that you can upload to YouTube or Vimeo or whatever, that is going to happen within this stage area here. One interesting thing about Adobe Animate, unlike some other drawing or graphic design programs you may or may not have worked with, is the idea that you can have content that exists half on and half off of the stage. So right now I have this, kind of green rectangle here. Even though technically it's half on the stage and half off, you can still see the whole item. In fact, I can actually even place this all the way off of the stage into this kind of scratch area that, and you can still see it even though it's not in the stage. That's okay. You can do that. Just keep in mind that anything not in the stage area will not be exported. So even though you can see it here within the program, if once we export this as a movie, it's only going to be whatever is within here. All right. So this is my stage area. Over here are our tools or our toolbox. Okay. You should think of this toolbox the way a carpenter has a set of tools. They have like hammers and screwdrivers and saws and things like that, or a metal worker might have a set of tools. So these are our tools. Most of these tools are related around drawing. There are some animation-based tools here, like the Bone System, which we'll talk more about later. One thing to note is when you click on a tool, you might notice over here on the left that some of the options change. So we call this a contextual menu, okay? Meaning that depending on what you have selected, this may change the options you have. There's another thing too, actually. Down here, this is our timeline. Timeline is where we look at our animation. in time. Okay. So if you've never done time-based work before, like an animation or a music, a video or something like that, having a timeline might be new to you, but the timeline basically measures, or not measures, but shows us where things are within time, beginning, middle, and end. Okay. Today, we're not going to really get into timeline this week because we're not really doing anything in time, but next week for sure, we are going to be discussing a lot about the timeline. Okay. Over here, this is our properties panel. Our properties panel is also contextual, which means it does change depending on what you have currently highlighted. So if I'm in the timeline here, it's going to give me timeline options. If I'm clicking on my stage here, it's going to give me drawing options. If I click over here on the tool, so this is an updating list of options that I can work with. So usually what it is whatever I currently have highlighted, it will give me options that I can play around with. Okay. Final thing here is up top. This is where we find all of our menus. So most of the things you can get through the graphical interface here. There may be some things that you want, you might want to be a little bit more specific. You can go through the menus here. Okay, so the menus hold various commands, things like creating a new document, opening a document, closing a document, exporting, which we'll talk more about later, edits, zooming in, things like that, symbols, which when we get to motion tweens, we'll talk more about symbols and things like that. Text, which we'll talk a little bit about how to add text, edit text through the Adobe Animate program. Okay. That's the general user interface. Other thing you may want to be aware of is if you click, I'm on the Mac version, so there's a special Animate menu. If you're on Windows, you will not have this. It'll be under Edit. Probably down here where it will say Preferences. My preferences is here. If you go under Edit Preferences, this allows you to play around with the user interface a little bit. Probably most of these you probably don't have to worry about. Probably the one thing you might want to play around with is the user interface color. So if you want more of a lighter layout, you can do it that way. This is the darker. This is the darkest. Okay. I kind of like the light one. I don't know. It feels very 90s. Let's do that one. Although that one feels very 2000s. Okay. All right. So what I'd like you guys to do before you move on to the next video, 1, make sure you have Adobe Animate installed. 2, open up Adobe Animate. Open up exercise 1. Just make sure you can do that. 3, make sure you can find and work with the preferences if you want to. Okay, so just go play around with the different things, close it, or choose it, or change it if you want. In the next video, we're going to get into some basic functions like zooming, drawing, things like that. Okay.